Welcome to the City Bar Justice Center's webinar on federal student loans, resolving student debt delinquency and default. My name is Ramona Morel. I'm the director of the Consumer Bankruptcy Project at the City Bar Justice Center. The Justice Center furthers access to justice by addressing the unmet civil legal needs of residents of New York City who are struggling with poverty and other systemic social economic barriers. The Justice Center is a network partner of the Education Debt Consumer Assistance Program, also known as EDCAP. This webinar was made possible by funds granted by EDCAP. In today's presentation, we will focus on the following. What is delinquency and default? I will describe the differences between the two, as well as the consequences of being delinquent and being in default. We will then explore some relief options for getting out of delinquency or getting out of default, and I will provide some tips for preventing default in the future. Lastly, we'll end with where to go for help and share some resources that will be helpful to you. So, what's happening with the Department of Education and defaulted student loans? Well, the Department of Education will resume collections of defaulted federal loans starting May 5th. The debt collection efforts could result in wage garnishments, interceptions of tax refunds, or even offsets of federal Social Security benefits. And it's really important that borrowers who have defaulted on their federal student loans be very proactive to prevent any of these debt collection efforts. Before we get into that, I do want to describe the process of going from delinquency to default. And the consequences for each are very different. But before you get into the default, before the federal government, the Department of Education can actually engage in some of those collection practices that I quickly mentioned, there is a process for going into default. So when a borrower has missed or underpaid one payment, they are considered delinquent. After 30 days, the servicer adds late fees. After 90 days, the delinquency will be reported to the credit agency. So this is all before it actually goes into default. Once it goes into default, which is after 270 days, the Department of Education will commence with debt collection efforts. Before they go into debt collection efforts, I will say that the Department of Education will send the borrower notices so that the borrower can make some efforts to try to get out of default. So the collection of wages, the collection of Social Security benefits, the interception of tax refunds doesn't happen immediately. There are notices that the borrower does receive before all of this happens. But it is really important to avoid that individuals understand that there are options for getting out of it, but should actually explore the reasons that they need to address the default issues. So when someone is in delinquency, the consequences are the two things that I had mentioned before it goes into default. The servicer will add late fees to the balance of the loan, and they will report the delinquency to the three major credit bureaus. So there will be damage to the borrower's credit. These past due payments can remain on an individual's credit report for up to 7 years. It can impact their credit scores. It can impact their ability to get credit, to get a car loan. It can affect even their ability, because their credit has gone down, to even be eligible for private housing. So what does an individual do before they get into default? If they're a delinquent, that means that you've missed one payment, or if you've missed a payment or you're having trouble making payments, then you need to be proactive. You need to act very quickly to remedy the delinquency and avoid any default. And there really are three ways to do this. The first thing you can do is to make a payment on the past due balance. If you're not able to afford the past due balance, then you want to change your repayment plan that you are in and explore a more affordable one, if possible. Do note that the affordable repayment plans are called income-driven repayment plans. Income-driven repayment plans are going to calculate your monthly payments based on your income and household size. So if you are not already in an income-driven repayment plan, you may want to explore that, because that may be more affordable. I do want to note that because of the constant changes that have happened over the several months of the federal student loan data system, that and the enjoyment of the injunction of the SAFE plan by the 8th Circuit court. And IDR applications were paused at some point. They are actually now back on. There is a backlog in IDR application processing. So be aware of that if you want to enroll in an IDR plan. There's a backlog. You may be placed into what's called a processing forbearance, and you certainly want to check with your servicer every month to make sure you're in that IDR processing forbearance. Uh, until your application is processed and approved. Because if you're not in a processing forbearance, that means that there are payments that are due and you're going to then actually get into default. The last option is to enroll in a deferment or a forbearance. And a deferment or forbearance will give you a little bit of breathing room to see if you can then make monthly payments going forward. Note that anytime you are in deferment, anytime you are in forbearance, the interest continues to accrue. Once you get out of deferment or forbearance, you have the option of paying that interest that has accrued, or it will be added to the loan balances. So your loan balances will go up every time you are in deferment or forbearance and then get out of that if you don't pay the accrued interest. So things that you need to know as you're moving forward and trying to manage your federal student loans. The consequences of default are a lot different than the consequences of delinquency. And that is why if you're just delinquent, you should be proactive in addressing the delinquency before it actually goes into default. So the process is very different. The first thing that will happen is that your loan portfolio will be reassigned from the servicer who's collecting, who sends you those monthly bills. It will be reassigned either to the Department of Education's default resolution group. And if it's a Perkins loan or a loan that's held by a federally backed loan, not tuition, federally backed loan that's held by a school, then it will be sent to a guarantee agency that will collect on the debt. So either way, you just need to know who is it that you need to contact to address the issue of the default. If you are not sure, once this has been reassigned, if you're not sure who to contact or where your loan is sitting, you can log into your student loan account by going to studentaid.gov and seeing where the list of the agencies or the department that you need to contact in order to reach out about the default. After it's been reassigned, then it will be accelerated. And that means that the entire unpaid balance is going to be due immediately. You will be ineligible for any type of affordable repayment plan if you're able to, had been eligible before. If you were pursuing forgiveness, like public service loan forgiveness, or even IDR forgiveness, those things, your default will make you ineligible for these. And if you were trying to get deferment or hoping to be in forbearance to give you a little bit of breathing room, that option is also not available when you are in default. You will also lose the ability of obtaining any additional federal student loans or grants for yourself or even for your children if you are looking to take out Parent Plus loans. And finally, the Department of Education will enforce collections, which involves either taking 100% of your federal tax refunds, and some states, New York being one of them, the Department of Treasury can intercept your state tax refund on behalf of the Department of Education. So if you're hoping to get that, or next year you think you'll get a tax refund and you're in default, know that you can lose those refunds. The Department of Education through the Department of Treasury can garnish up to 15% of your federal and non-federal employment wages, and 15% of your Social Security benefits if you're retired, as well as your a certain percentage of your disability, Social Security disability that you receive as long as they leave $750 available to you. If you're an individual that receives SSI, SNAP, cash assistance, there is no interception or offset of those benefits. So now that you've gotten a sense of what is a delinquency, what is a default, and the consequences of the default, now we can explore some options for getting out of default. And there really are two options for doing that. The first one is to consolidate your defaulted federal student loans into a new direct consolidation loan. And when you consolidate, you are agreeing to one of the two things. Either you're agreeing to repay the new direct consolidation loan under an income during repayment plan, or you are agreeing to make, if you're not eligible for an income during repayment plan, you are agreeing to make 3 consecutive voluntary on-time full monthly payments on the defaulted loan before you can consolidate it. And if you choose to make the 3 payments on the defaulted loan before you consolidate, if this is an option that you want to exercise, the required payment amount will be determined by the loan servicer, the loan holder. And if you're not able to make that payment that they've calculated, then you certainly want to ask for a reasonable and affordable repayment that is based on your total financial circumstances. Do know that, well, the consolidation, where you've consolidated a defaulted federal student loan into a new direct consolidation loan, it's faster, it's simpler, and there's no fee for that, by the way. It may be faster and simpler than a rehabilitation, which I'm going to describe in a few minutes. It can likely result in you losing any IDR credit that you have established or have already accrued towards forgiveness. So please note that if you have a significant amount of IDR credit, that will result in a forgiveness of your student loan balances, because if you are in an IDR plan, and depending on the IDR plan, it may say that after making X number of years of payments, you still have a student loan balance, that balance is going to be forgiven. So in this case, if you're close to that, then you should not consolidate your federal student loans if you're in default. There, you may want to explore rehabilitation. But if you're nowhere near that, it may not matter to you, and you can lose that credit and it will restart, it will reset as zero. Some other things to know about consolidation. It is often the best option for most borrowers to get a default. And because things are complicated, you really have to explore whether consolidation is in your best interest. One of the things being that the IDR processing, there's a backlog in the IDR processing, so you may not be able to get into an IDR plan, and you may be asked to make those 3 consecutive payments. The consolidation, also know, is not available, is not allowed if there's a wage garnishment order that has been issued, although it is allowed if you have a Social Security offset or there's a tax refund interception. You can consolidate, but if there's a wage garnishment, you cannot consolidate. And it's not possible if the Department of Education, the U.S. government, on behalf of the Department of Education, is seeking or has a judgment, a money judgment, in federal court. So those are 2 things that can bar you from the consolidation. If you are being sued in state court by the guarantee agency, not the U.S. Department of the U.S. government, just the guarantee agency, or by the school that is holding the federally backed loan, which is typically a Perkins loan, then you can consolidate, because the consolidation will help resolve that. Just a few more things to know or to watch out for in terms of consolidation. There are a limited number of consolidations. So if you've already consolidated all of your loans at one point, you might not be able to consolidate out of default, may have to explore rehabilitation. If you were in a 10-year standard repayment, consolidating may extend that beyond the 10 years because now the loan balance will be much higher than you had before. The loan balance will include those late fees, the accrued interest, any accrued interest, all of that will be added to the principal, and that will increase the loan balance itself. And because of the 8 circuit courts injunction on the SAVE plan, the consolidation, those benefits that people were going to receive under a SAVE repayment plan Borrowers who consolidate at this point may reset their IDR forgiveness count to 0. So if you're looking to consolidate and you're not sure this is your best option, I would highly suggest that you reach out to any of the organizations in the EdCap network. You can certainly reach out to us for any further advice or assistance. The second option to getting out of default is to rehabilitate your loan. And rehabilitation pretty much allows a borrower who's in default to bring their loans back into good standing once they have made good faith, on time, nine on time monthly payments. So for 9 months, consecutive payments have to be made that are actually spanned out through a 10-month agreement. And you can rehabilitate and get out of default. Note that the rehabilitation is a one-time opportunity. So if you rehabilitate a defaulted loan and then you default again on that loan, you will not be allowed to rehabilitate a second time. So when you rehabilitate, do make sure that then you have a plan after you've gotten out of default to continue to stay in good standing, to continue to either make payments or explore ways to not fall into default again. It will prevent a wage garnishment and a treasury offset that hasn't happened yet. But note that with a wage garnishment and a treasury offset that is already in place, the loan rehabilitation will not stop that wage garnishment or treasury offset right away. As a matter of fact, the borrower may still be getting a wage garnishment or treasury offset. So the treasury offset would be the garnishment of their Social Security benefits or their tax refunds are intercepted. Those things will continue until you can get out of default. And it may stop, and you may be out of the default for it to stop if after making at least 5 of the rehabilitated payments per agreement. So just be aware of that. And you'll be making payments, and still, if there's a wage garnishment or treasury offset, that's still that's already in effect, that can continue. However, the wage garnishment or offsets that are still continuing, just know also that they do not count toward the rehabilitation payment. Only the payment that you have agreed on with the rehabilitation agreement will count towards the rehabilitation payment to get you out of default. So also note that, because many people think that because their wage garnishments and offsets are also happening while they're making those payments, that you're going to get out of default much faster, because those 9 payments are going to count. You're going to double count both the garnishment or offset and the payments. That's not the case. You will only get rehabilitation credit to get out of default if you make payments that you had agreed on. If you're unable to afford the payments per the rehabilitation agreement, then you can negotiate a more affordable amount, and you would have to provide information on your income and your expenses, but you can try to negotiate a much more affordable and reasonable monthly payment. In some cases, and this depends on the borrower's particular financial situation, in some cases, a borrower may only have to pay $5 a month. After rehabilitating the loan, then the borrower will be eligible for future forbearances, deferments, and in some cases, even forgiveness. Some things to just kind of note or keep in mind about rehabilitation is that it is much longer than consolidating, and is much more costly because you're making these 9 monthly payments. So do be aware, and you want to make sure that you're exploring both options and picking the one that is in your best interest and one that really addresses your financial situation in that moment. So if you are able to rehabilitate, and that's your best option, then go ahead. But if it's not, then do consider consolidation. And when you're considering one or the other, note that the rehabilitation is the only option if there's a wage garnishment or if all your loans are already fully consolidated. So you won't have any other option but to rehabilitate your loan to get out of default. And it is not an option where there's a federal court judgment similar to the consolidation. The rehab may be the best option to get out of default for a borrower with significant IDRF credits. So remember when I said when you consolidate, you may lose those credits towards the income during repayment forgiveness. With rehabilitation, you don't actually lose those credits because you're going to start making payments, and then you can continue to accrue where you left off after it's come out of default. You continue to accrue where you left off towards forgiveness. So if you're very close, you only have a couple of years or a few months of credit to continue to accrue, you may want to explore rehabilitation instead of consolidation. So before we get into the loan rehabilitation process, I did actually go into what does it take to do the consolidation, because it's very straightforward, very simple. You basically log into your FSA account, your studentaid.gov account, and just look for the consolidation file, apply for consolidation, and you can submit a consolidation application that way. With the loan rehabilitation process is a little bit different. There are actually 6 steps to keep in mind. The first thing you want to do is to call whoever's holding your loan. That could be the default resolution group or the guarantee agency or collection agency that is holding your student loan, and ask the representative about rehabilitating your loan. They are going to ask you for your AGI and your household size so that they can start determining or giving you an estimate of what your monthly rehabilitation payments are going to be. As they're calculating that, and that amount may not be the exact amount that you will have to pay, because they need to get specific information from you and forms and documents, particularly income documents, to then make that final determination. So before you get that final determination, let the representative know if that amount is not affordable. Because if it's not, or you want to figure a way to negotiate a much lower payment, you need to let them know right away, because you'll need to complete the rehab forms and provide proof of income, and complete an income and expense form and return that with the rehabilitation loan, the loan rehabilitation agreement. So to sum up the last 2 parts, after calling DRG, or the guarantee agency, they're going to send you a loan rehabilitation agreement. You'll have to return that with your proof of income, and proof of income will be your pay stubs. If you're not working, then they may accept tax returns as acceptable documents as proof of income. And you want to make sure that you are completing an income and expense form that will help lower those monthly payments. And the loan rehabilitation income and expense form looks like this. You basically provide your personal information, your income, and your expenses. And all of this will help the agency determine a much more affordable monthly repayment towards the rehabilitation. Then after you've done all of that, and there's an agreement executed, and you've agreed to a final amount, you'll have to start making monthly payments for up to 9 months. Note a couple of things: that you may not get a written notice of the rehabilitation amount. And it may take months to calculate the payment. So you want to make sure that you follow up constantly, make multiple phone calls, make sure you're calling every week to get that final amount, so that you are not behind or making the wrong payments. And if you need any notification in writing, you surely want to request that. So just be proactive. Once you've made those 9 monthly payments, then you're at a default. And what happens is that the agency will then transfer your account to the new server. So that will be sending you those monthly bills. And then you'll be able to enroll in an affordable repayment with that new servicer. So you will contact them about making sure that you can get into an affordable repayment plan. Note that your payment may be higher than the rehabilitation payment. Remember, with the rehabilitation payment, you can negotiate a much lower amount, but once it's out of default, your actual monthly payments are going to be calculated, based on either a fixed amount, for an X number of years, a fixed term, or based on your income in an income during repayment plan. what we have for you in the next two slides is sort of a chart that compares rehabilitation and consolidation. So we highly encourage you to take a look at this to kind of figure out which one is in your best interest, and if you meet any of the requirements for rehabilitation consolidation. If you don't meet the requirement for consolidation, then you know you have to go into rehabilitation and vice versa. But do take a look at this chart and this one as well that pretty much describes the pros and the cons. I highly suggest you go through that before you actually take action on any of these options. So now that we've gone through sort of what are sort of the ways of getting out of default, how do you stay out of default? And it really just comes down to these very two things that I have been mentioning throughout the presentation. Make sure that you are either in an income driven repayment plan that is going to be monthly payments that are based on your income. And if not an income driven repayment plan, something that is affordable, a repayment plan that's affordable, or in those moments where you're not able to make a payment, ask for a deferment and ask for forbearance. And with the deferment or forbearance, note that those are limited. So you want to be strategic. You don't want to exhaust all of your deferment months or your forbearance months, but you certainly want to be strategic, but use them. They're not long-term solutions. They're only there as a breathing room to help you so that you don't default, you stay in good standing, you get the benefits of forgiveness if you're pursuing that, and avoid any collection efforts from the Department of Education. So with that, I leave you with some of these resources. If you need information on the income-driven repayment, on the loan consolidation, all of this can be found in the Department of Education's studentaid.gov. I highly suggest, because there's so many changes that are happening, I highly suggest you constantly check out that website. Or at least sign up for updates. At the very bottom of their webpage, you can sign up for updates, and every time there is one, you will get a notification. You know, really, it's about being proactive. It's about staying informed. It's about making sure that, you know, you just don't let these things go. When you get a notification from your servicer, you address that immediately. Make sure your contact information is up to date so that you don't miss any of the updates or notifications. But it really is about staying informed. And speaking of staying informed, you can do that by following us online. You can send us an email if you have any questions, or you can call us at any time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for attending this program. Have a good day.